Hi, this is Russel Ziecker. I use my voice to shape the way you experience TV through music. This is my episode of LipRoll with Valerie Morehouse.
Welcome to LipRoll. My name is Valerie Morehouse. I have a unique privilege to work with some of today's most influential and iconic voices as a celebrity vocal coach. This is a show where my guests and I are able to peel back the curtain and kind of bring you backstage and paint a picture of what it's like to be an artist, an actor, a broadcaster, and beyond, while still confronting all the challenges of mental health, physical health, and spiritual health. Welcome to LipRoll. Well, welcome to LipRoll. I'm your host, Valerie Morehouse.
And I'm your co-host, Ella London.
And one of my favorite parts of my job is working with music, supervision, and actors.
It's because you actually get to help create the voices in these shows.
Well, you know what? I think that there's something really special about hearing one of my clients as we've worked on songs, and then they get to put that song on their piece, like a TV show or a movie. I find that very fascinating.
It must be just like that kind of magical goosebump moment. And our guest today has actually created the soundtracks for Mad Men, Nashville, Orange is the New Black, and many, many, many more shows. He is the EVP of TV music at Lionsgate and Starz, the legendary
Russel Ziecker.
Yay.
Thank you for joining us today on LipRoll, Russell. It's so fun to have you in here.
Thank you.
Where did we first meet? Ella was asking me this the other day.
It must
We
have
met
been...
in Nashville, right? Did we meet in Nashville or LA?
No, it must have been Nashville. I mean, it was definitely on Nashville.
Yeah, it was just for the pilot. Or no, we were shooting.
Before.
Was it
Yeah.
before?
Yeah,
I
you
think
know
it was
what? That's
before.
it. It was the pilot, because you worked on the pilot.
Yes. Yeah.
Only a few of us did, really.
Yeah. It was fun 3 weeks.
So crazy.
It was a crazy
It was a
3 weeks.
memorable time.
It was very memorable.
So give us a little insight of what you do at Lionsgate.
Process-wise, as an overview, I oversee all the music aspects of all of our TV shows, and have for a long time, 14 years now.
Wow.
So, and there was no TV department before I joined Lionsgate. And so it was all of us kind of pushing the stones up the hill to try and figure this out, how to make good TV. And I got lucky on some early shows, and we did as a company. So process now is basically I'll read a script, we'll do margin notes with the staff on the general feel, which I always look at like you're casting a wide net right there, and many things might fit the tonality of the show. And then as you see how it's cast, it may inform your process as far as whittling that down into, well, they skew a little younger.
Right.
And you always have that background filter going in, how much of this is music oriented. And then you shift to seeing dailies, which inform you how something's lit. And then when you finally see assemblies, what the feel is and who needs support. Do you want to go and score or support a character with music or a combination of characters? And at that time, I'll deliver to post kind of what was a big box of music down into this is the initial voice of our show in a music sense and a place to start. It'll evolve from there.
So just a little bit more than listening to a track and saying, oh, that one will work.
Oh, yeah, there's that. And then, we always, or most of the time at least, are involved with setting the tone and then music supervising, if that's a functionality for that show that we're working on. And then we go about, as I tell my staff, hiring ourselves away.
Okay, so
And taking a bigger picture view, managing budgets, but in that interim period, I'll hire a music supervisor for all the scripted. A few things we'll do ourselves as a department, a composer, and the music editor.
Yeah. So there's a lot. There it is, and we were talking about this off air earlier because we had John Houlihan in here. I don't know if you know John.
Sure, I do.
But
He's taller than I am.
Is he?
He is.
Yeah, I guess he is.
He is, yeah.
You
Just
both
a
are
little
very,
bit,
very
just a little
tall.
bit.
But it's interesting to find out how different people got into this industry. And I know a little bit of backstory on you, but tell our listeners a little bit about how you got involved in this industry.
Well, I grew up in a really small town in upstate New York and kind of just saved. I wanted to get out of there, as my therapist might say. You went as far as you possibly could on your first plane ride before hitting water. So, I wanted to play, and I was able to achieve that early on and kind of ascertain that I don't like touring as much as my initial goals were
You were a bass
affixed
player,
to that.
right?
I was a bass player.
Yeah.
And, it definitely, that informs my process still today, because I can use that language and somewhat, I hope that I've held on to how a musician fields information coming at them. So I basically use that as a translation tool. And I can still write and I can still play a little, but I don't, do that professionally. I've got a lot of great people that I've met along the road that do that much better than I do. So
That's awesome. And then you went on to Chrysalis.
music publishing is also
publishing.
a kind of a bedrock of something I use still every day, because the essence of a good song and just the power of a good song against picture is, it's still a mystery to me. There's some magic to it that I don't possess, so I still can live in a world of like wonder. It's like watching close-up magic. I mean, people think that I can write songs. I'm a good song editor. I can help you mold a song, but I don't write songs. So, but having that kind of filter in my head all the time, it's still an A&R function where it's kind of like extreme A&R, where I'm assessing it for lyric style and tonality and see if it fits our show, and the good songs still win.
That's awesome.
I hope.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because you were kind of, I just love that you're talking about the magic that you still find every day in doing what you're doing. But when you started, like you said, TV music wasn't existing the way that it does now.
Right.
When you started at Lionsgate,
Well,
and
it started in the 1990s, right?
And artists didn't want to put their music.
I was a manager in the mid-90s and had 4 label acts, and one in particular I'm still rather close with, and he's still in it to win it. So, but it was funny because what I do now was the ghetto. It was our song, and this one artist I had to remind, he said, my songs for film and TV, it's like too precious. I'm not selling out, right?
Right.
Interesting.
And I reminded him that at the time, Porky's 2 was the biggest film ever in Canada, and REM had no problem cashing checks for the main title.
There you go.
So-
I
There you
remember
go.
that film to this day. I think I ended up in acting class with one of the actors in that. And I said, yeah, I remember you from Porky's. That was the claim to fame.
So
But it
cool.
was a very different thing. There was not a lot of that happening. It was sort of like you had to invent this whole role and you had to fill this whole space.
Yeah.
There was a huge void, and then all of a sudden, I think these artists are like, wow, I can actually make some money doing this. And now maybe more so than ever, because all these artists have to tour. They don't get their money from
revenue,
records.
lines of revenue have dried up, and the focus is definitely here, both in a promotional sense and to accrue revenue in doing your craft, selling what
Right.
you do.
And so it really for you over the last few decades has really been building that playbook that everyone uses today, and you are really at the forefront of that.
Luckily enough, yeah.
How long have you been at
It's
Lionsgate,
14
Russell?
years.
And how
yeah.
did you get into Lionsgate?
So we had a structure at Lionsgate at the time where we had a centralized music department. So I had a boss who was a person that I knew for a long time and had many record labels that he looked after and bought and sold during the time. And he wanted to build a publishing company for Lionsgate. So I was a former publisher and kind of knew where to look behind the curtain for international income and stuff like that. So I kind of helped him, and basically they said, why don't we keep these guys? And they become the department. And at the time he looked at me and goes, hey, we're starting TV. Why don't you do TV? It's like, I'll do it for a year. It's like,
Right.
I'll do it for a year. And then shortly, not too far after that, he left, and then we became destructured. And it was very evident that, the film music group, part of our our company world was their responsibilities transferred under film, and mine went under television group.
So you kind of had no choice. You were in it for a bit longer than a year, it seems.
Yes.
Yes, all these years later. So with that, what's your favorite day-to-day, part of your day-to-day? What do you look forward to? Because there's so many aspects of your job.
Yeah, it's a strange job. It's never the same. You know, I try and finish everything. I'll work late generally just because I need that wall painted in my mind before I can walk out the door. So I have to paint it tomorrow. It's hard to pause on things. So I still will listen to as much music as I can. I like doing kickoff meetings. I like building things. So, you know, that's like meeting with a showrunner and having all these puzzle pieces that all the production entities talk about, and to see what kind of puzzle piece I need in there, or multiple puzzle pieces to make more of a complete picture. Yeah. And it's a service-minded industry. I don't think a lot of people view it as that, but we're always serving something bigger, which is a challenge for a musician's mind, because as an artist or artist manager, you can see the whole process on a horizontal. Here we are in the cycle. We're getting a record out, we're building for that, or we're going to be on the road for this time. And you kind of control the beginning of the process from the songwriting to the end when you pack up the gear and we're done touring. So this is different than that. Right. It's really that part of that world that you do every day exists to support this bigger medium, arguably, you know? And it has to be with that servitude in mind. I mean, how can I elevate this other piece of media?
Right. Yeah, it's like taking it to the next level.
I mean, and for me, as a voice coach, I have to ask this question always, but what's your favorite voice that you've placed in a scene? Any iconic singers or actors that come to mind?
The first thing that comes to mind was Robert Plant.
That's a good one to come to mind.
We like that.
Who was in a band with Buddy Miller, who,
love Buddy.
After this time that I did this deal with Robert, became our executive music producer on Nashville. So they were in a band together called not Ode to Joy, Band of Joy at the time.
I didn't know Buddy played with Robert. So you never know anything about Buddy unless someone else tells you, because he will never talk about himself.
That's so true. Yeah. The most humble person I know.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had heard, I was working with Kelsey Grammer on a show called Boss. Kelsey went to see Robert and Alison Krauss at the Greek Theater and called me the next day and said, we have to have this song that Robert Plant did. And it's like, well, I can't do off-the-shelf main titles for this. And he played a really hardcore mayor of Chicago with a lot of political stuff in there. It was amazing. And Gus Van Sant was the
It was a great show, by the way.
Producer.
I saw it.
I still, there's certain
really
shows
good.
that I still kind of miss, and I think of that show often. We got to experiment in a big way on the music end of things with the composer too. And, you know, when I put the deal together for Robert, it was an existing song of a public domain. His arrangement was a public domain. He and Buddy's arrangement was a public domain song called Satan, Your Kingdom Must Come Down. And everybody kind of signed off on that and wanted it, and it really worked really well as the main title. And at the end of all the like wrangling and negotiation, I don't know, it's like it all went through. I got an approval when they were on the road from the Ukraine.
Whoa, that's awesome.
And I remember that coming through, and it all worked to everybody's benefit. And it's like, did I do this? I mean, I really.
You're like, we'll just tell everybody that I did. So
I was a function in it, but I don't know who worked through me on this one. It's
amazing.
Well, you just have such an extensive filmography, and we will dive into some of that, not all of it, otherwise we'll be here till probably next year. But we're going to go into some of it in the bonus episode, but let's get a sneak peek into 3 new shows, and we thought we'd start with Zoeys Extraordinary Playlist.
Okay, that was a fun ride. I had been, involved with like Nashville being more Americana country based, and a show like Step Up that was very dance and choreography heavy.
Right.
This was a combination of all those things, and it was really, I'd call it a quasi musical because music really is the backbone of the story. It's a great premise, and we were setting out to do the pilot. The premise definitely plays into it. It's about a female programmer in San Francisco area, and she's being held back a little bit or tamped down by the programmers, as we say, in her office. And she's kind of more of a math science geek than she is a music hipster from the East Side or something. So she's very impressionable, not quite what I'd call like a strong woman yet. And she, in the first, literally the first act, the first 10 minutes, we cover a lot of material. We build her storyline, and part of it is she's having headaches, and what we find is her father has a brain wasting disease, which actually happened to the writer of this piece and our showrunner. So there's some autobiographical bits in there for him. And so she's panicked. She's a bit of a hypochondriac. So her mom says, go get an MRI. She gets an MRI. There's an earthquake in San Francisco. The machine malfunctions, and you see all songs of all time, of all genres being downloaded to her head.
Whoa.
Wow.
Which we have to represent visually, and I think I had 12 seconds on the audio.
Gosh.
So
How do you do that?
and then we cut to commercial. That's our first act out.
That's fantastic.
So during that time, when she comes out of it, she wants to call her parents to make sure they're okay after the earthquake. They tell her everything's fine. And at that time, she's walking along the streets of San Francisco, and a lady breaks into All by Myself in big commercial wail,
Not usually.
Exactly.
The song.
And she turns a corner, and there's three sassy girls checking out a bike messenger, and they're singing "What a Man" by Salt and Pepper. And we turn another.
See, I can't help it. I want to sing it. I just want to sing
You
along.
can just hire her
Sounds
to
like-
do your sound.
And then we do a very large scale version of the Beatles' "Help" as she turns the next corner, which is an analogy for she's realizing she's reading people's inner thoughts. They come to her by song, and the world needs help. And before too long, all these people are coming at her from all directions with their hands out as they sing the Beatles' "Help."
I
So,
love that
cool.
song though. Need somebody help. Okay, see, I have
right,
to do my
thanks,
little
Ella.
thing too.
so we did eight cast perform vocals during the pilot. We have outlines. We're going into production a month from now, and the writer's room is supposed to deliver like 4 to 6 songs, but we're talking 8 or 9 in every episode.
Of course.
Which
Right.
I can't.
Another
It's hard to say
Nashville.
no to, but it's difficult to
Yeah.
budget.
What about finding the music for P-Valley? What was that like?
Okay, P-Valley was one of the shows after our integration with Starz integration with Lionsgate that was just beginning, and there's a lady involved in that who's our showrunner named Katori Hall. She had written the show, the play Pussy Valley, and we apparently took the safe title.
Yeah.
P-Valley.
And I've never had this specific conversation with her, but I think she came from this world of strippers, and I mean, she knows that
It's like
world.
small town, right? Mississippi
yes,
Delta.
northern Mississippi, and it was amazing. I saw the first cut, which looks like an independent film, very gritty, and I mean, we're not there yet, but I ended up. The essential part of any kind of show or medium that you attach your kind of compassion to it has to be empathetic with the story or the characters, more importantly, So I found myself at the end of this, like, these people wouldn't be my friends. This is not my world, but I have enough understanding and care from the story she she painted that like I wonder what happens next. I don't even want to read ahead.
You're
you
like,
know,
I want to be surprised.
So we were able to do something on that show that was innovative in that space anyway, and rather difficult to put together in the logistic world. Where on the show Nashville at the time, we were the first show doing this too, where we'd like a writer's room.
That's right.
In showrunners world and in TV writing, we kind of constructed songwriter rooms that were positioned to give us songs for that show that were exclusive to that show, that we could use to intersect with storyline, to support the characters and where they're going. And it hadn't really been done in a hip-hop sense. And this is very specific, like Atlanta, Memphis, North Mississippi trap music. And they have some interesting shadings there, and the conversations I've had with the showrunner, it's like her intuition is so spot on. She knows this world, and it doesn't really. It's a hard show to make because we're applying. This is the way you make a TV show. Yet her instincts are kind of out of the box and super interesting because she knows that world. They're intersecting nicely now, but it wasn't an easy thing to put together. And you know, we did a writer's room in Atlanta where we shoot and got 20 songs in 2 days.
Fantastic.
Half being kind of more leaning toward trap music and half a little lighter R&B stuff.
I love that. I always love delving into the backstories of how everything comes together, and I think the next show is my favorite subject, which is shows that are currently in development, and I know that Valerie's going to be excited about this one. It's called Julia.
Yes.
And it's like
because
Mad
we
Men,
love
right?
Mad Men so
Men.
much.
Right.
She's like, bring me more Mad Men.
Yes.
Well, period pieces are super engaging to work on if you give yourself to it. And this, we don't have a script. We have outlines so far. It's the story of Julia Childs. It may or may not be called Julia. I mean, it's just a temp title. It'll be for HBO Max, Warner streaming service. And it's the period of her life where she starts her show in Boston or Cambridge or wherever it was up there, Concord, maybe one of those places in the Northeast. And from what I understand, the radio or the TV station she filmed at is still in existence. So I think we're going to try and integrate that and film there
that'd be
too.
cool.
Yeah.
Some of the names they bantered about as cast for her were super interesting. I can't mention them because I don't know if they got those people. And
You're like, I'm not
but
sure.
it was, you know, fun to sort of just have my staff and me go through build a character for her, not knowing if we should be as authentic to her story and character as like we did in Mad Men, or whether it's something where contemporary music could be applied. But tried to touch on her back. She was already married to this Frenchman, had spent time in Paris. So there was a rich time there with a number of big like vocal artists from Paris and France that we get to play with, and some different shadings, some weird stuff. Uma Sumac, some.
So it's like combining original new music with some stuff from the archives.
Yeah, and we haven't had the kickoff meeting yet, so we don't know where the authenticity lines lie yet.
right.
But it was interesting to just send a box of cool stuff to the showrunners to play with when they're in the room or conceiving or getting inspired. I hope, you know.
There's so many aspects to the job that we've learned from just having a couple music supervisors on the show. But one of the things that we always like to talk about and discuss is the spiritual, the mental, the physical health, and how it relates to your voices, just for you personally, or for probably actors and musicians around you. So, how do you keep a balance, Russell, with all of this? Because I know personally your schedule is nuts.
Do you sleep?
Yeah.
Not last night, but yeah.
How do you keep your balance?
Well, there's a few. There's a couple things that come to mind. People always tend to ask me, what do you like? What music do you like? And it's like, it's the wrong question, because music becomes such a tool for the job that, going back to that filter, it's like if you pitch me something, I'm always trying to utilize where is it useful, rather than, wow, that's
Just
an amazing...
listening for
just
joy.
listening for joy, yeah. It happens a little bit on the weekends, and it would probably skew more classical, unless I'm in like a Clash mood, or, I'll go all in on somebody. So it limits your view of music. I think it's the downside of the job, because you're taking something you love and it has to be utilized, or it sits on the shelf, basically.
I get that. It's like watching singers. I can't do it. That's my job.
And enjoy it in the same.
This is not.
You're constantly
relaxing.
analyzing it and thinking about where it could be, whatever you're working on.
Right.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. I was at Hollywood Bowl with some new friends of mine the other night, and we were watching a couple of bands, and it's like, are you listening for stuff that you could use on TV? It's like, yeah, that's what we do.
That's what we do.
I'm still working.
And does it happen all the time? It's like, I'll sit in church. We do a show with Oprah, and it's like, how can we turn this gospel?
Yeah. So music would not be the place that you get to sort of unwind. It would be other things.
So I'll go to podcasts a lot. I'll try and walk a lot. Masterclass is fascinating. I've been through 15 of those.
I've always seen those pop up.
It's fascinating to me because my wife watched part of my watching of the first one that I did was Ron Howard, and she goes, "You don't want to be a director. Why are you watching that?" It's like, oh no, this is how Ron Howard problem solves.
His process.
I'll watch Annie Leibovitz. I don't want to be a photographer, but you get I just finished Frank Gehry. Amazing.
Wow.
So those things are more philosophical in what I can apply in the office, and the same with, or for a better workflow. And also one thing I caught on to in Nashville was, being in a studio, and there were a couple of us that would say, oh, he's a number 2. He's a number 5. It's like, wait, what kind of national number system is this? Because you have one as a player, but this was something totally different. And it was the Enneagram. And it's really become kind of a tool I don't think about in the office. A good example was not specific to the Enneagram. Enneagram is basically 9 personality types.
Right.
We're a blend of all of them, but there's a place that you default for reasons. And it's a place of safety, or a place that you go when you're fearful. So it's interesting to sort of not type people, but get a sense of where they're coming from. And it's applicable to sit in a room where there are no rule books when you're sitting with showrunner or multiple producers on a project. And it's like, okay, he's asking that for these reasons. And you start to feel or be able to identify where the insecurities lie and how you can best help that person.
Now I know every time I'm talking to Russell, he's going to be breaking me down.
He's going to be like, well, Valerie is doing
Where is
this
she coming
today.
from? What's her highest good?
How do I get the answer I want? I'm going to have to respond like this.
You need a lot of that doing the show as we worked on together. We worked on Nashville for the listeners that don't know, but you need a lot of those skills.
These shows do not run themselves.
There's so many personalities.
So many. As we wrap up here, what advice do you have for people wanting to come into music supervision? Because it's such a varied world now from the world that you started back in the 90s.
It's true. I'd say avoid music because music's only 20% of your job. I think your ears have to be present all the time because you have to learn to listen, most of all. I think you have to be broader in your resources that you open yourself up to, like things like whatever works for you, podcasts that are informative, because all these things are layers on how you'll eventually do your job. And, the most important rule of all is it's not your show till it's your show.
Right.
And you may have a wonderful idea, but if you can't sell it to the people that count, whose show it is, then you have the wrong idea.
Yeah.
That's great advice.
That's
everybody
great advice.
Listening. Well, thank you guys.
Yes.
This has been really fun and educational, as it always is. But thanks for listening to LipRoll. And Russell, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for
it was
having
great
me.
having you.
Thank you so much.